Hey, everybody, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And let me just start by saying, Jeffrey Foote, great job on the plinking bone sounds outro yesterday. You all don't get to know this, but when I sent Jeff my little file that I recorded yesterday, right at the end, after the stuff that I said to you that sounded like the end, there was a secret bonus part of the file where I'm like, hey, Jeff, can you do something like with the xylophone plinky bone sounds? Because I think it'd be really fun. And he went above and beyond and made a little version of his outro music that had the plinky bone sound that we were talking about because of this passage in Matthew 27 where people come back to life after the graves are split open after Jesus dies on the cross. And, you know, it's one of these moments where I just want to pause and say, it's the little things, isn't it? Great job, Jeffrey. Thank you for making the plinky bone sound. We were talking about the plinky bones yesterday and the sound that it makes when skeletons reassemble in animation. Because we're considering the idea that this notion of resurrection, which sometimes you hear people say, oh, that was a brand new thing in the New Testament. This was novel. It would have really pushed people. Well, we're considering the fact that, no, it wasn't novel. The idea that resurrection was somehow the end game of all of this stuff that God was doing, his redemptive plan to defeat death, that was a very old idea, baked into the firmware of the Old Testament. Mixed metaphor. Because going all the way back to the very beginning, the problem that has to be undone is that sin brought about death. It slapped a lifespan on people. Sin created a separation from God. So the separation from God part, well, we see that symbolically dealt with right after the death of Christ, when it says that at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Okay, I get that. How did that happen? By the thing that's a metaphor for the power of God, the earth shook and the rock split. That power is intimidating, but that rock split part of it is a reminder that, there's water, there's life, there's good stuff that comes out of even the tremendous power of God. For example, what might that good stuff be? Next verse, 52, the tombs broke open and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after Jesus' resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. So again, going all the way back to the very, very beginning of the whole story that we're trying to sort through and that Jesus is held out as being the culminating event in, the problem, the setup, starts when people are alienated from God by their own humanness, by their own sin, by their own shortcomings, by their own desire to elevate themselves to the role of God instead of acknowledging God, the maker, in the role of God. But then the second problem that comes with the garden is the problem of death. That immunity from death is no longer a thing, and entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, is introduced into the world according to the early stages of Genesis. And so now there's another problem that has to be solved in order for things to be squared up and made right. And in this strange little list of miraculous things that happens here after the death of Jesus that we get in Matthew 27, those two big problems are both being addressed. Separation from God is resolved in the work of Christ, and death is ultimately defeated in the work of Christ. Now, for somebody who's just reading through Matthew for the first time ever, they don't totally know that death is defeated yet. Jesus has made a bunch of predictions. It looks like he can bring people back to life all the way back in, was that 8 or 9? I remember the girl who he went up and everybody's sure she's dead. Like, they got professional mourners. They already paid the money for people to come and play flutes and dress up and look super sad. That was a thing that people who could afford it did back then. And Jesus walks in and he's like, yeah, she's not dead. She's asleep. And they all think that's real funny. Like, we're professional mourners. We know what dead looks like, but then she's not dead. So Jesus has said that God's power is greater than death. He has demonstrated power over death, and he said he's going to come back to life. But still, if you're reading the thing, usually when people die, they stay dead, and so you're going to reserve judgment until you see what happens. The first hint of even with Jesus dead, somehow this yields life over death happens basically immediately with this detail. But again, I would argue this is not a novelty, because going all the way back to the first of those plinky skeleton sequences in Ezekiel 37, which is a big and even somewhat overwhelming book with tremendously complex, abstract imagery, we get an image here that's pretty straightforward. There's a bunch of people who are dead, and then they aren't dead anymore. It says, "The hand of the Lord was upon me, And he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. And he led me back and forth among them. And I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. Now, you'll recall, we've been here together, you and I, in Ezekiel 37, not in a valley of dry, dead bones, but in Ezekiel 37 is what I mean, because the language Son of Man gets used here. And when we were doing our trip through the Old Testament to look at what Jesus might have been drawing on when he used that terminology earlier, we came here briefly. So if it sounds familiar, that's why. He asked me, Son of Man, can these bones live? I said, O sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you'll know that I'm the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and a breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our bones have dried up, and our hope is gone. We're cut off. Therefore, prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says, O my people. I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord. When I open your graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. Now, look, if you go and read 1st and 2nd Kings, we've got some pretty pronounced other examples of resurrection in the Old Testament. But this prophecy clearly aligns with what's happening in Matthew 27, right? I mean, that specific language about opening up the graves, that specific language about the people of Israel being dead, that specific imagery about not just dead, not, again, morbid as it is, like we were talking about yesterday, not dead like freshly dead, like, I caught a fish. We're talking maybe once every few seasons here. I don't kill many fish, but I've experienced it where the fish is there and it's clearly dead. And I'm like, but you still look like a fish. It still seems like I could just put you back in the water and things would be okay. But I can't, because even though it's still fresh enough that your body seems right, the essence is gone. It's over. We're not talking about something like that where it's like, are you asleep? Are you awake? We're talking about something here where the bones are making xylophone sounds because they are so old and dried out and dusty and done. It seems like nothing should be able to put that together, but even the language of God there accounts for what would need to happen for these things to regain life, to go from being a thing to being a person again. You'd need tendons and ligaments and flesh, and God seems fully aware of those hurdles and seems fully aware to address those hurdles. Additionally, just putting all of that stuff back together, like the dead fish in my hand on the side of a stream in the mountains, it still doesn't make it alive, even if all of the right parts are there. It needs essence. It needs the thing that God has alone, and that is the I am, the essence, the being. That being needs to somehow be imparted. And here in Ezekiel, the language is breath, but God is willing to even give that breath of life back into what is dead. Come on. You're smart. You see that the imagery here goes beyond even just physical resurrection, which is clearly being portrayed, but there is a giving of life that transcends even our moment on this planet. There's a giving of life. There's an image here of death as a concept being defeated, and death as a concept being defeated at the whim or the word of a God who is so powerful that something that for us is completely unbreachable, life and death, he has total control over. So I very much view this passage as a payoff on that Son of Man language that Jesus was drawing in part from Ezekiel earlier in the book of Matthew. It's a payoff on the plot of the Bible, that you got a problem of death that would have to be solved somehow. There's a hint in Ezekiel that it could be, and then drawing on the same language here, it's like, no. You just wait. You're starting to see it all happen right now. Jesus looks dead, but this is actually life. Here's a hint of it, but just wait for what happens next. I'm super happy to be able to say that this episode of the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast is sponsored by Samaritan Ministries. My family and I have been a part of Samaritan Ministries since forever. It's got to be well over a decade, and it has been such a good thing for us. So over the next several weeks, probably about once a week, I'm going to be telling you a little bit more about that. But I thought a good place to start, so you would just know what Samaritan Ministries is, would be to just read their thing, because they have a description. They got an elevator pitch for who they are and what they do. So here's how they put it, and I think it's really good. Don't be limited by networks when it comes to choosing your healthcare provider. There's another way. Samaritan Ministries is a community of Christians who pay one another's medical bills without the use of insurance. As a member, you'll have a biblical, affordable way to pay for your medical needs where you're free to choose the doctors, treatments, and hospitals that are best for your family when and where you need them. After care is received, your medical bills are sent to Samaritan Ministries, and they'll notify members to pray and send money directly to you to help you pay those bills. Members also have access to an online community of support and health resources to keep medical and prescription costs low through discounts and fair pricing. I particularly like this language right here. Healthcare freedom can be yours today. See how at samaritanministries.org/TMBH. This has been a great fit for us. It might be a great fit for you. Even if you're thinking, I'm pretty sure that we've got everything on lockdown with our family and how we're handling stuff on this front. Cool. I would still be so grateful if you would go to samaritanministries.org/TMBH. just to show them appreciation for being a part of this and helping to make the podcast go. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.